Well, it's happened. The moment in time when a publisher of one of the world's most successful IPs in the history of gaming has effectively outed themselves. Because it's one thing to make fancy PR splashes, but it's another to file official documents with the SEC. And that's where Snail Games, the publisher and owner of the ARK franchise, has put their own incompetence on full display. Now, when we take a look at these numbers, the damage here is simply staggering. Nearly 49% of a once vaunted and rabid player base has been shed in the span of a year, and the money printing machine of the ARK Survival franchise, at one time a surefire win, has begun to crumble. How does a publisher who, according to Wiki, owns the fourth most sold game in the history of gaming with Survival Evolved, lose that many players in a year? It's an interesting question for sure, and one that we need to probe in today's video. If at any time you feel like supporting the channel, please hit subscribe and ring that notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. And let's get into the story behind ARK. Okay, this is actually a perfect intro into what has happened to ARK, call it the perfect comparison, and it comes to us via Bethesda and their now highly successful shadow drop of the Oblivion remaster. Now, for all intents and purposes, and according to many critics, this is the true way you pull off a successful remaster. Every bit of the loved original found under the surface, but now greatly enhanced using the latest tech, in this case Unreal Engine, and all with subtle but substantial changes and improvements made to the core mechanics and game systems. But for the purposes of our comparison, we need to put on our role-playing hats and take a look at what this entire Oblivion remaster could have been. Everyone ready? Okay, let's get started. Imagine if Bethesda and Virtua Studios took a completely different path with this release that saw you purchase the Oblivion remaster, you download the game, it runs, albeit not well, but it runs. It's Oblivion with a shinier coat of paint. You go through the whole character creator, maybe make a completely off-center character, and then you get to see that iconic opening cutscene of Uriel Septim and that Patrick Stewart monologue. I mean, it's all there. It gives you shivers as you first remembered. At this point, you make your way through the Imperial prison, escorted by the Blades, fighting off those endless waves of assassins, rats, and goblins, and finally, you reach the iconic gates that, once opened, will let you free into the open world of Cyrodiil. Now, this is the very moment you have been waiting for, that famous Bethesda moment where you get to come out into the open world, but try as hard as you can, you simply cannot get those gates to open. You furiously grab the game box and start reading over these very small disclosures, only to see that the Oblivion remaster will be delivered to you in small chunks every 2 to 4 months. This chunk was just the opening scene. The next portion will gain you access, possibly, to the Imperial City, and you'll be able to claim the full Oblivion remaster somewhere between 2 and 3 years after you bought it, maybe a little longer. We'll just have to wait and see if the studio can actually stick to the roadmap. So, when I reduce it down to the ridiculous like that, you're probably saying to yourself, no way in hell would I ever go through that. Why would anyone consent to experiencing a remastered game in this manner? But for fans of ARK, that's exactly what they've been through, plus a second, third, and fourth helping of corporate bullshit heaped on top. As mentioned in the intro, the numbers here are staggering. According to Wiki, ARK Survival Evolved is the fourth most sold game in the history of gaming, with now over 79 million copies sold, bested only by juggernauts such as Wii Sports, GTA 5, and to no one's surprise, Minecraft. Now, at its time, it was a genre-defining survival sandbox experience featuring a combo of a multitude of attractive features, the first and foremost of which was breeding and taming dinosaurs. Now, where it all starts to come to a grinding halt, though, can be found back in June 2021, with the release of Genesis Part 2, the final paid expansion for Survival Evolved, and of course in June 2022, with the release of Fjordur, the last free non-canonical map released for the game. as once the paid expansions were over and done with, Studio Wildcard, the creative minds behind the success of Survival Evolved, began to realize the sheer reality of game development. You see, it takes money, a lot of money. And even for a small to moderate-sized studio like Wildcard, those month-to-month costs are not cheap. In tandem with the continued cost and essentially no new revenue coming in for DLC sales, Snail Games and Wildcard were also facing another existential threat, one of their own creation that was out in public and starting to reach a boiling point: ARK 2. This was revealed way back at the Game Awards in 2020. ARK 2 was touted to be the next evolution in the ARK franchise, featuring Vin Diesel along with Souls-like combat, but the issue was again money, or the lack of it. How was the studio going to get from Genesis Part 2 in mid-2021 to a fully released ARK 2 project with no major sources of revenue? The answer here was to remake the same ARK Survival Evolved experience, list it in early access to give the studio some level of protection, and to release it in small chunks back to the same players that had supported them over the years with Survival Evolved, all while charging a premium price tag alongside paid DLC and, of course, premium mods. At first, the truth about this project was not made public, but the speculation that ARK Survival Ascended was a silent crowdfunding effort by the studio to help fund the development of ARK 2 was finally confirmed and made public in September 2023 with this admission. Quote, "Another factor is for business reasons. Developing a next-generation sequel, while no longer releasing paid expansion packs, has proven difficult for our studio's long-term survival. So, we need to continue generating revenue while we develop ARK 2. Okay, so let's go back to that Oblivion what if we talked about earlier, and let me add this little bit into the mix. Along with the remaster being sold back to the players in small chunks, now imagine if Bethesda simultaneously shut down the official servers for that original Oblivion 2006 game. So, not only was the new game not complete, but the studio went in and turned off the support and official servers for the game that everyone was still out there enjoying, at which point, we would probably read about this in the news where an angry mob had descended on Bethesda's front door demanding Todd Howard being cast into the realm of Oblivion and that gate destroyed. But the sheer insanity here is that's exactly what Studio Wildcard and Snail Games did to ARK fandom. Official servers and all studio support for Survival Evolved ended midnight September 30th, 2023, the very same day they admitted they needed the money from the sales of Survival Ascended to fund the development of ARK 2, severely fracturing trust and faith in the studio. Survival Ascended came into the world kicking and screaming, originally slated to simultaneously release on all platforms, instead being released in waves, first to PC in late October 2023, with Xbox and PlayStation split out into the third and fourth weeks of November. And here begins the downward spiral for the ARK franchise as a whole. You see, even on top shelf, PC rig Survival Ascended was far from acceptable, while consoles reported horrible graphics and major performance issues. It was a nightmare scenario for Wildcard. Not only had they sacrificed the old game and pushed those players away to their own private servers, but the new game was barely functional, only released with a single map, and the review scores were positively abysmal. Even now, in May 2025, Survival Ascended currently sits at an overall mixed rating on Steam, with only 59% of the reviews coming in as positive. Whereas the older game, the game that the studio had shut down to drive players over to Ascended to boost those overall sales, still maintains a very positive rating, again on Steam currently showing a score of 84%, which is a night and day difference between the two. And here's where ARK's owner and publisher Snail Games now comes into play. And thanks to their recent SEC filings via their 2024 annual report, we get to see just how badly this franchise has suffered. Now, buried deep into this 100-plus pages of filings, we finally see this. Quote, "During the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2024, ARK Survival Evolved and ARK Survival Ascended combined for an average total of 213,000 daily active users," they go on to say DAUs, "on the Steam and Epic platforms," so this is PC only, "as compared to 416,479 in the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2023. They finish up by saying, we define daily active users as the number of unique users who play any given game on any given day. So, to break this down into the context of our timeline, in 2023, the ARK franchise on PC platforms combined was seeing DAUs, or daily active user counts, in excess of 416,000 players. And remember that Survival Ascended launched in late 2023 on PC, which then takes us into 2024, where again combined numbers from the publisher confirmed that nearly half those DAUs were present. It's now fallen by almost half, down to 213,000 DAUs. Overall, we've seen some meteoric rises and dramatic crashes in gaming lore, with recent history bringing to mind The Day Before, once Steam's most wishlisted game that launched, closed, saw the studio shut down, and Steam enforce a rare mandatory refund to all customers within the span of a week. But Fantastic and The Day Before were far from a known commodity. The ARK franchise, however, is. It is established and well known, and to see Snail's own records essentially admitting that their bread and butter franchise, which accounts for nearly 90% of its total revenue, had in the span of a year shed nearly 50% of its player base, well, that's just mind-blowing. In fact, across the board in 2024, net bookings and total sales for ARK were down significantly despite the launch of ARK Survival Ascended, with only a large deferred income posting able to push the revenue into a better state than that can be found in 2023. Now, if you're Snail Games, you take a look at those dramatically bad numbers for 2024, the slump is certainly visible, and no matter which way you try to spin it, they're not going to look good to anyone. So what do you try to do? Well, first you strike a deal with PlayStation so that all PS players who subscribe to PlayStation Plus get free access to Survival Ascended as of the beginning of May 2025. And that's certain to drive up those slumping daily active user counts and impress the shareholders, right? Or at least it should, in theory, bolster those counts. Also, in one of the damnedest and most interesting turn of events, Snail Games announced at the recent Games Developer Conference in San Francisco that they themselves, not Studio Wildcard, would be developing and selling back to players as part of the 10-year anniversary of Survival Evolved, a new non-canonical map called Aquatica. Now, luckily, I recorded and saved this trailer before Snail Games decided to delist the video from their official YouTube channel, probably due to the overwhelmingly negative reception it received, which, yeah, just take a look at the damage here. At the time I grabbed a screenshot of the carnage, this was sitting at 1.5 thousand upvotes to now over 57,000 downvotes. Not only was this trailer one of the most egregious displays of AI gone horribly wrong, but the circumstances and drama unfolding surrounding Aquatica behind the scenes were simply incredible. You see, Aquatica, which was originally thought to be coming to Survival Ascended, was then announced as dropping sometime in the near future for Survival Evolved? That's right. The same Evolved that had seen all official servers sunsetted and studio support removed way back in September 2023. So, not only was Snail Games attempting to sell their love letter, their 10-year anniversary map, back to those ARK players, but they were also going to attempt to open up official servers for the very game they had closed in order to milk those players once again. Adding fuel to the fire was the story that broke that the Snail Games developers working on Aquatica supposedly had no idea about this AI trailer and that it was being prepared and released kind of behind their backs, which I reported on in this video. Check in the video description for a link to that one. As they say, the numbers don't lie, and based on Snail's own admission in this SEC filing, seeing a nearly even split of revenue between consoles and PC in 2024, and throwing into the mix the comparison of current Steam player counts between the still more popular Survival Evolved and the newer Survival Ascended, well, it produces a no-win scenario where Wildcard and Snail have a tiger by the tail without many options for escaping unscathed. Their plan to resell Ascended back to their players failed badly on several levels, including gross overconfidence in what they felt players were willing to tolerate, and more importantly, what players were willing to purchase. ARK as a whole has suffered greatly since 2023, both in sales and interest in the franchise is further evidenced when you take a look at the lifetime Google Trends charts showing the YouTube search for just ARK Survival. And despite the newer Survival Ascended launching in late 2023, where you see this small spike, overall, the remaster has done little to energize gamers to re-engage with ARK. Even switching the search category away from YouTube over to web search and general searches shows much the same result, although that spike seems slightly higher around late 2023, which could possibly be attributed to many people simply wanting information about that remaster or possibly wanting information about ARK 2, which, by the way, at this point has been confirmed by Studio Wildcard to still be in production with no ETA, although Snail Games has previously stated that the game was slated to drop in late 2024, which has come and gone. However, overall player-based sentiment is one of disbelief that ARK 2 will launch anytime soon, if ever. The decline of ARK, once Snail Games' gravy train, can also be confirmed when you start to take a look at what Snail is attempting to do by pivoting away by placing so much reliance on ARK revenue. They mention many times in these financials revenue generated from Bellwright. They also mention a multitude, God help them, of small indie projects that have been acquired alongside their new venture, listen to this one, AI-created drama on-demand series such as My Ex's Best Friends, Truth or Dare, Faux Fiancé, and the classic Pregnant by the Boss, made available through their new SalyTY app. Yeah. There's also the upcoming release of For the Stars, formerly Project Hermes, which appears to be a sci-fi survival game that I know at one time was built on Web3 and crypto, although it appears to have possibly shifted away from that play-to-earn model. And all of this at the behest, demand, and made public through the vision of the company's CEO, who has made very many questionable decisions in the past, but makes it crystal clear that Snail Games is his company and his company alone, and his vote is the only one that matters. As again stated in their financials when they identified themselves as a controlled company, quote, under these rules, a listed company of which more than 50% of the voting power is held by an individual, which it is, in this case the CEO, group, or another company that is known as a controlled company. And they may elect not to comply with certain corporate government's requirements. Where ARK goes from here is anyone's guess, but if the player counts continue to be in favor of the still shut down Survival Evolved, while the overall player counts, as evidenced by Snail's own internal figures and admissions, loses 50% of its base in the span of a year, the ability of the franchise to stay afloat is then placed in serious jeopardy. Say nothing of ARK 2 and where that stands. Snail and Wildcard learned a very hard lesson of what happens when you try to pull a stunt like selling the same game back to your player base incomplete with optimization issues, while also trying to push your loyal players to purchase that subpar product by simultaneously shutting down the current game and turning off the lights. Make no mention of the crazy back-end deals made with Nitrado for exclusive server hosting rights and the insane monetization that has now permeated this entire franchise, when in the past it was stated those would never make their way into ARK. If you happen to like the video, please hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. If you want to support the channel, we have channel memberships with tiers and perks for extra access. And until the next one, this is 𝑙tBuzzLitebeer signing off.